Hey, this is Andrew Stoeten of the Batflip, and you're listening to The Walk-Off with Scott and Adam.
So thrilled to be joined by a personal favorite when it comes to Blue Jays content. You can find his blog, The Batflip, on all things Toronto Blue Jays on Substack. Andrew Stoeten, welcome back to The Walk-Off, man. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Oh, happy to be back, guys. Love it. This is great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, buddy. I really do enjoy your blog so much, and it's kind of funny because you did a whole piece on the Rogers possibly selling some of their shares of the Toronto Blue Jays, and it was incredibly well researched and in depth, and just a good look at the possibility. So great work on that front, my man.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's a bit of my wheelhouse. A bit. It's weird, it's like you're right about the off season is a lot of what interests me most actually,
Right.
it's a good time of year.
Well, it's funny. I figured we might as well have you on, and we could talk about it face to face rather than try to regurgitate the whole blog that you put out there. So let's start with that here. The fact that Rogers Communications, owner and operator of the Toronto Blue Jays, is in the midst of acquiring Shaw Communications and may sell some of their stocks in the Blue Jays to make this happen. But there's way more behind this than just that. And I know a pile to unpack here. So, Andrew, where is a good place to get into this? I know, do we start with Fenway Sports and them being approaching MLSE, or maybe you just get into it?
Sure. I mean, I think that's sort of a separate issue, a secondary issue. Like, I think the Shaw deal is probably where to start, right? It's going to be like it's a $26 billion deal that Rogers has to take over Shaw Communications, much of which is financed by debt. So I think it's like 20 billion of which is going to be financed by debt. Everybody always talks about Rogers has lots of cash in the coffers. That's why they should pay their players more and be bigger players on the free agent market, which, I think that they do clearly. Obviously, they don't have just 26 billion sitting around. And also,
right.
The Blue Jays and the media division are a pretty small, piece of that puzzle. In terms
so they're
of
doing what schmucks like you and I do to buy a house right now.
Basically, yeah, absolutely. And I think that the thought is that, and I think this has been going on for a long time, as the MLSE Fenway thing sort of shows, MLSE considering, well, that would have been complicated, but also like Rogers is, when I wrote about it in the piece that you're referring to, it sounded like that they have been thinking about taking their stake in MLSE and the Blue Jays and spinning it out into a different company, which wouldn't, when you start having to finance a renovation of the Skydome or building a new ballpark, that doesn't, start adding even more debt to the bottom line, which they're already sort of getting into with the Shaw deal. So I think that the way that they see it is, you could take $2 billion, which is what one of the banks has valued the Blue Jays and the Dome, as if you can get that $2 billion and if you can get, whatever the stake in MLSE is worth, if that becomes owned by, as part of the same company owned by Edward Rogers or whatever, that's probably another $1.5 billion, something like that. I think I heard Stephen Brunt talking about this on the Fan the other day. That's not obviously making up for all the debt that they're going to go into having to buy Shaw, not having to buy Shaw, but choosing to buy Shaw, and further consolidate the monopoly that it's on our telecom industry, which is terrible. But
they have to monopolize.
Yeah, right, exactly. Oh my God, it's insane. But I think that's the thought, is that will at least be a big portion, or not a quarter almost of the debt that they will be having to go into to finance the Shaw deal. So if they can get that much back by keeping control of that asset, basically because Edward Rogers would own it anyway, I think that seems to be the most logical owner. And also that helps make their books look a little better. It's a win-win for both, it's a win-win for Rogers, really, right?
Right. Yeah.
So so that sounds like that's maybe where that's going to go. I don't know, but the piece that was in the Globe at Andrew Willis was a great piece. You say I was in depth. I don't know. I was reading what he wrote, so I can't. I followed this story and I follow. These are the kind of things I follow all the time. But credit to him for that. And it also said that there are other options on the table, like only selling. Maybe finding a minority owner for the Jays. Selling a percentage of it just to make money that way, or also tracking shares was kind of interesting, and maybe a way that they might go with it, which is something that the Braves have done. So, which is the other like corporate owned team, Liberty Media in the States owns them, and that's something that they did while they were in the they already had, I think, shovels in the ground on the new stadium that they have, but it was early on in that process, just to sort of help finance it, and it's like they created a separate share that people can invest in. that sort of tracks just the profit or the revenue of the team,
Right.
which is just basically a way to get a cash infusion that way. Which is maybe they do both. I don't know.
Right. So let's just go back
Yeah.
a second here and
Sure.
talk Fenway Sports.
Sure.
It looks like they're going to be acquiring the Pittsburgh Penguins, and part of this story is that they approached MLSE to be involved in this, which of course would be a conflict of interest because Rogers has some stocks in that, and that's partly what you were talking about with them making their own company, right? That would get rid of that conflict of interest.
I think so. I mean, that I'm not sure, to be honest. I mean, I think fortunately we don't have to worry about this because they can't own the Penguins and the Leafs. There there are obviously laws or rules within these sports. I think you can have I think a minority owner can have stakes in multiple teams, but I don't think you can have a majority owner also having a big stake.
Sports is harder to monopolize than communication companies.
It turns out. Yeah. So yeah, the way that would have just been complicated. I'm not sure how that would have ended up working out if Fenway merged. So the MLSE was 37% owned by Rogers, and also that new company. Rogers' stake would be small enough that maybe it wouldn't be an issue, but I think it probably would have been an issue to have the Blue Jays owned in whole by a team that also has a big stake in the company that at that point now owns the Red Sox and Liverpool and the Leafs and the Raptors
Right.
and all of those. But I think that's something clearly, like, all of this has been sort of looked at for a while now, because I think that story was that it happened like 14 to 18 months ago. So they're definitely like on the road towards some big things, which I think is probably that sort of tracks because that's when the stadium talk was sort of happening as well. And I think that's probably the big concern, is that there is going to have to be the last time they got a lot of public money for a stadium, I mean, it wasn't the same owners, but like the Blue Jays got a free stadium almost, that didn't work out so well. I don't think they're going to get a lot of public money this time. So I think Rogers is cognizant of that, but also knows that they need to build a stadium. And it's not, this is the weird thing about the Blue Jays, right? It's like they're not like they're getting closer to being like one of the big marquee sort of teams, but they never really operate like that. But like clearly, they're not going to threaten to leave town. This is just too lucrative a market. Like that would be absurd. Like, and then that's sort of that's how the Oakland A's are like playing their stadium issue and trying to get public money. But I don't think the Jays, I mean, nobody would take that
Have
seriously.
the same leverage, no.
They absolutely not. Like the MLB wants a team in Toronto. It's an incredibly lucrative market.
So if Rogers does wind up selling off some of their shares in the Blue Jays, I know one of the big questions everyone's wondering is, what does this mean for the Toronto Blue Jays moving forward? I mean, we're finally watching this ownership group spend big on this team, right? And it's the team that everyone has felt like has had the market for money to be spent in the past, and it's just really exciting to see it finally happening. And now fans are freaked out a little bit about this, right?
Yeah.
Will this impact the direction of this current team in 2022, or is this all hearsay?
I don't think it would. I mean, I think that's part of it is that, Mark Shapiro, and, I'm guilty of being pro Shapiro, from the get-go, because I know people who worked with him in Cleveland who were like, no, these guys are great. And, you see what they did. And it was obviously a weird situation. Understandable why fans at the time were not real happy with how that all went down. But yeah, it seems like what his vision has worked, and he's done a very good job of selling the vision to the board and making it, making the finances and the financial end of it line up and make sense to the board of directors, which, obviously if you have Edward Rogers in your corner, that's going to be a big help. As we've seen at Rogers, he even when he turns out is like the god emperor of Rogers, even though for a while there they kind of let it function as though it was more democratic in there. But I think he's on board, and I think that the rest of the executives there were, and especially now are, because they're all his cronies. But I think that all makes sense, and I think that's probably for the near future at least, that's definitely I don't think going to change, and potentially a good thing if Edward Rogers ends up being in full control for the near term. But you never know what down the line. what his personal whims are going to be, or what his, you know, where his finances are and what he wants to do. And, you know, maybe there will be times where he is less inclined to take a loss on the team, quote unquote, which is also very literally quote unquote, because like I think if you count the stadium, if you put the stadium and the team together, it's about $200 million that they spent in the early 2000s, and now they're valued at $2 billion. And if you take that away from that's $1.8 billion in value that they've accrued, just the equity of the franchise in the stadium. So that's like $90 million every year. So whatever loss they have, it's offset by the equity increasing by $90 million a year on average.
Right.
So,
that's
so losses, right, 100%. So losses are, in gigantic air quotes when we're talking about this. But the same thing would apply, I think, to if Rogers kept if it stayed not in the company as opposed to Edward owning it. Their whims could change as well. They could, and I think, maybe with the having to put so much debt on the books with Shaw, that could be a problem for them going forward, because they're going to be looking always, all the time, very interestedly in their shareholder, the stock price and what means most to shareholders. Like, that's just how that company and every big company and every company basically functions, right? So that could theoretically become a problem for the Blue Jays if they stay under the main company of Rogers. Because they're going to be looking to do whatever they can to make the books look as good as possible, and putting $1 billion into a stadium or $300 million into a shortstop is maybe not something they're going to be as interested in.
They're going to need us all to upgrade our internet.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any chance that Rogers would go the route of the Green Bay Packers, who just offered their public stock options for sale again for the 6th time, I believe? Do you think that would be at all an option? I know they just raised about $90 million for renovations at Lambeau Field there. Do you think, is that at all a possibility? I know the Saskatchewan Roughriders did that. I got my lovely share behind me here. But I know I'd sure probably shell out $500 for a share in the Toronto Blue Jays to help fund a new stadium or some renovations.
Right. I think that is sort of on the table. And I think that's kind of what the tracking shares are. But I still think that there would be a guy who owns it.
There needs to be
and who ends up,
right?
who can sell it when it's worth $4 billion in another 20 years or whatever, right? So, but yeah, I think that's a similar concept, and it wouldn't surprise me if they went that route. And yeah, I don't know. I have no trust in these people to do the right thing by the club or by anyone but themselves. But when it comes to making sure that their product and that their company makes money, that's probably a pretty safe bet. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
All right.
Honestly, Andrew, thank you so much. That was very insightful and put so much better than we could have done it ourselves. So appreciate that.
Anytime.
I did want to chat Pete Walker with you. Blue Jays pitching coach extraordinaire. And this question's inspired by a tweet I saw of yours just today. And it is funny because I've seen this fan base more in love with a pitching coach, and for good reason. Mm-hmm. Excellent pitching coach than I've ever seen in maybe the history of pitching coaches.
I don't think I've known the name of a pitching coach before Pete Walker as a fan.
Right. They just kind of did their thing. And the truth is there's a lot of coaches and staff and systems in place for the Jays when it comes to improving and turning pitching around. Pete Walker, exceptional, but he's not a wizard, right? He's not an island, if you will. Not every pitcher can be fixed. That's fair, right? There's a lot more to this than just Pete Walker.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And this is not to take anything away from Pete Walker. And the tweet that you're referring to, Rob Longley of The Sun, who's much closer to the team and is there every day, responded and said, and Pete would be the first person to say it's not just me, it's all these systems and other people, and that he's been made a better coach by the fact that they have technology and they have all these systems. But the Blue Jays are starting to get mentioned among the teams who are really on the leading edge of pitch design, and they have they have a pitching lab in Dunedin. They have analysts and people doing R&D who are looking into all this. It's not like Pete Walker's looking at a guy and saying, that's the guy, we got to sign him up and I'll fix him. there's a lot more that's going into it. And again, not to take anything away from Pete, because obviously he is sort of like the touch point for the players and is creating the buy-in and has his own ideas and is clearly giving guys confidence and creating an environment where they can succeed. Like he's I'm not trying to take anything away from him, and that's a whole remarkable thing that he does. But yeah, there's a lot more that goes into it and I don't know that anybody does. Like I don't know. I can't speak for every fan, but there's definitely I'm sure some people recognize that there's more to it than that, but also it's fun to be like, oh, Pete Walker is magic and a wizard, and he's also a guy who just has so much. Like I think he first came here in 2002 to 2006. He pitched here, and then except there was a year that he was in Japan, and I don't know when he joined the system as a coach, but I think he was in New Hampshire in 2010, I want to say, and then joined the Jays as the bullpen coach in 2011. So he's been a guy around this organization for a long, long time. Now through 3 regimes at the top, and it's just and is also just a cool guy and a likable guy and a down to earth person who you kind of have to filter anything Ross Atkins or Mark Shapiro says through like boardroom speak, but Pete Walker is just a little more direct, right? And so it's easy to like him, and he says more, like Charlie will not speak in riddles, but like it's just he's gonna say he's happy about whatever has gone on, and he he's just puts a positive spin on everything. Which I think they really like about him, and I enjoy that about him as well. And I think maybe that's because it's like not his first language as well. I don't want to like criticize him for that, but Pete is definitely more like direct and it's just like I don't begrudge anyone and don't think anyone shouldn't be like, yeah, Pete Walker's awesome.
Oh,
but
of course. But Jays fans are kind of funny. Like, they're more than just the example of Pete Walker. Like, there are still people in this fan base that would take a bullet for Alex Anthopoulos, who
for sure
I can't think of.
You've read Bat Boy's tweets as well, yeah.
Right? Like the people or the folks in the organization that fans are drawn towards, and then they just love them forever. It's interesting. It's great. And that's a Toronto specific thing when it comes to front office people and coaches. It seems like, but and it's just, to me, I'm more interested, personally, just as as someone who covers the team and is more, more than casual about thinking about how the industry works and all that, the nuts and bolts of it. It's like, I don't know, I don't want to believe that it's just Pete doing his thing. I want to know more about like, what are they doing? What is the technology they're using? What are they seeing? How are they identifying it? How many people are involved? Like that kind of interests me, and I don't like that getting, shoved into the background, because that's sort of where a lot of the work is really being done, I think. Absolutely. I did want to talk Rule 5 draft with you, because that's coming up right away. And
real barn burner, yeah.
Real barn burner, right? Samad Taylor and Joey Murray of the Jays, probably the most prominent of their possible guys that could get scooped, were left off the 40-man roster. Do you think that these two guys are still probably going to be Blue Jays by, let's say, July of 2022?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I could see them. I could see one of them getting picked up and returned. I think Taylor. I think the breakout was really loud, and there's lots to like about him. But I think he is a guy, and I think I wrote this in a piece
He's
like
not
the other
ready
week.
Yet, eh?
I mean, it's the difference between him and Leo Jimenez is that like Jimenez has plate discipline and can play multiple positions and is like a plus defender at multiple spots, whereas Taylor's more just a second baseman, and like the strikeout rate's pretty high for Double-A. And even though there's a lot of like interesting things in the number, the step forward in power was good. Like there's lots to like about Samad Taylor, but he's just a guy who I can see, and I could see the team seeing, if anybody dares to take him and keep him on the big league roster for it's not going to go well, and he's not going to last the year on their roster, I think. Murray is probably the more interesting one. He was hurt, right? Like he's barely pitched like the last 2 years, of course, because of the pandemic in 2020, but he's a guy that they've really liked. So I don't know if that means that they're not, they don't see it for him, or like if they're worried about the injury, or if they just think that teams are going to be scared off by the injury. But he's a guy that I think a lot of people thought could, maybe not be a starter, even though I think he started a lot, but has that, high spin fastball and the changeup or whatever whatever pitch mix he has, like is sort of unique and looks like it can play in the big leagues, at least out of the bullpen. So he was definitely he was a guy who I thought they might add to the 40-man, and that they didn't. I think was kind of interesting. Yeah, but I still think I know Jordan Romano got scooped up by the Rangers and then returned, right? Like
that's right.
And that's a guy with some talent. It turns out.
Real talent. Out of curiosity, Andrew, how bad do you want Robbie Ray back? Like, do you feel his return is imperative to this team's success? And if you, Andrew Stoeten, were the general manager, what's the number and years that you would feel comfortable signing to the man to?
Oh, that I don't know. I mean, I'd Robbie Ray should get paid, right? I don't begrudge him that.
No, of course.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, but going 6 with a pitcher is a long time. But the fact that Matt's got 4 makes me sort of think that maybe Ray can get 6. Maybe that's how that plays out, which is a long time, even for a guy who's only still 29 or was 29 during the season. I don't know when his actual birthday is.
30, but yeah, like he is.
So look. I'd go. I mean, I really like Robbie Ray. I think that he was obviously, goes without saying that he was great this year, won the Cy Young. Like, and I think that could be durable. And I think that he's shown a lot of signs of that over his career. And he's had a great year in like 2017 as well, and then kind of lost it for a bit, which is a bit scary. But I don't know. I think that what we saw was pretty compelling evidence that he'll be real good for a long time. I don't think that he's imperative to the team, though. Really, I think I think there are a number of guys out there that you could add, and that's kind of where they're at, right? I think the Barrios signing was like that. That is more meaningful, probably, to me. I think that to make sure that he's around, he's like if we're betting Ray versus Barrios next year, I'd probably take Barrios, even though the numbers weren't as good this year and probably never have been as good as what Ray did this year. He's just such a durable and consistent guy, and I think that it seemed like when they were talking about him at the at the press conference and in the wake of that, like they seem to think that they can get more out of him, which is kind of scary for other teams, but a real nice thought if you're a Blue Jays fan. But yeah, I'd love to see them bring Robbie Ray back. I think that would be great. If it's Kevin Gausman, if it's Max Scherzer, if you can get him for 3 years, that probably would make more sense to me than Robbie Ray for 6. Verlander for 1 or really technically 2. I think that would have been a great move for them. Obviously the comfort of Houston made a big difference for him there. But yeah, I just in thinking about, and I've talked about this a bunch on the blog for the duration of the offseason so far, it's just you're sort of having to think about how the finances work, not just next year, but like 3 years from now. When Bo and Vlad start getting really expensive, and and Rogers should not be hampered by any of these finances. Like, I don't want to be like counting their money for them, but I think that they, the team obviously operates on a budget, and it would have to be pretty unprecedented, in terms of spending to have them have another $100 million pitcher, and Barrios and Springer. And now Bo and Vlad, like you're talking about payroll that's getting into areas where the Blue Jays have never gone before, which they should. They absolutely should go there. But I'm sure that that's a big part of the calculation. So I think I see why that they've been linked to all the like upper mid-tier guys who are getting shorter contracts. And Ray it would be great. I think that it would be real fun to have him for 6 years. That's a scary proposition for any pitcher, but he's also been a guy who's really been durable.
He's been durable too.
And if you like believe in the stuff, if you believe the 2 pitches can work, which I think you can, especially if you have a better bullpen where you don't have to like rely on him going through the order a third time quite as much as they did last year. Like, I think that would that not only saves mileage on his arm, but also gives you a better chance, because I think like literally everybody third time through he was not as good as first and second. So I think it can work. It's like having a high leverage reliever throwing 6 innings for you. That's really good. I would be thrilled with them making that move.
And it's funny because the durability thing is something that maybe Ray doesn't get enough attention on.
Yeah.
I mean, the only starts he missed were the one at the beginning of the season when he fell down the stairs holding his kid. It's
and year over year, and I think that's that's the best predictor of future health is past health, right? So
okay, let's take a bit of a left turn here and talk the minor leagues, because minor league housing, it's
Sure.
finally happening, it seems like. And my God, it's about time. And I know that there's a ton of details that aren't being put out there yet, the who's and how's and what's of the whole thing. So it's totally possible the MLB still screws this up. But
Yes.
where are your thoughts on this? And do you think that this will be like an organization-wide thing, team to team, or do you think that they're going to pick and choose who gets this sort of accommodations?
I think it sounds like it's going to be everybody gets it, and I hope that that's what it is, and everybody should get accommodations, and everybody, the minor leaguers should get a fairer wage. They should get a living wage and not have to work jobs in the off season, and all of that money is just a drop in the bucket compared to the budget that these teams run, which is it's really disappointing as a fan. Just to some of that stuff that's under the hood, that like the way that the whole the Latin American international front, like, when they're going down and making handshake agreements with 15-year-olds is kind of weird too. And there's all sorts of dumb stuff with that, that should be rooted out and
eloquent way of putting it, but I can't agree more.
Yeah, I know. It's really dispiriting as a fan who, we're in an age where we know all this stuff, whereas like it was easier to romanticize the game when you don't know like all of its dirty secrets when they're not, it's like now we're looking at it in, it's like getting glasses for the first time. It's like, oh wow, I could actually see all these things now that we have the internet, and it's all, the industry has sort of proliferated and people are interested in all these corners of the industry. You see some weird stuff. And yeah, I linked to a piece the other day, Mark Normandin wrote for Baseball Prospectus, about how it's basically, the movement on the minor leaguers and housing is a sign that they're afraid of minor leaguers organizing, because there's definitely there have been rumblings, and there's definitely, there's groups out there talking about organizing the minor leagues, which would be a good thing, which I think that would be very beneficial to them and less so to the teams. And that is totally frustrating. All of this is, but it's just, it's so little money relative to what the teams are paying to players and paying, just their overall operating budget.
Real estate, like they're just going to make money off.
if they're buying places, man, I don't want to go to that block in the city where all the minor league ball players live in one spot if they're buying it. But but yeah, it's weird too, because it like the Blue Jays have their affiliate. They've had affiliated in Vancouver, right? Like maybe they wouldn't have kept them if they knew they were going to have to pay for housing in such a high price market, right?
The Vancouver market, they're like, oh, we're getting screwed. I wish we were in Toledo.
For real. So I don't know, but maybe it all is going to go into a common pool, and we'll do it that way. I don't know, in order to make it more equitable for the teams, because the teams, of course, love equitability amongst themselves, just not for anybody else.
Man, that's a great point though about that Vancouver housing market.
For real.
Holy smokes, I never even thought about that. I'm kind of stressing now about those Vancouver Canadians. That's a pricey. Whew. Okay.
But imagine before though, when the team, you're on your own, kid. You're making, you're getting a $2,000 a month stipend, and good luck finding a place to live in Vancouver. Like that's crazy.
That's a great point.
Skip high A. They're like, can we go low A to double A so I don't need to look for
real?
A place yeah. So Rob Manfred and the MLB are obviously always trying to shorten baseball games. It's one of their favorite things to try and do, right? Curious, do you think a pitch clock, personally, do you think a pitch clock will work? And either way, do you think that that's something the MLB is going to go towards?
I think so. I tend to think that it will go towards that. I don't know how well it'll work, because there's, part of it is just about health, right? So maybe that's why it wouldn't, a little more time between pitches does allow guys to throw harder, which I think is kind of the part of the impetus to not just to shorten it in terms of like having an actual clock on it, but maybe you get more balls in play if guys don't have quite as much time to recover between pitches. You can, generally, I think that the studies have shown that you're able to throw a little bit harder if you have a little bit more time in between pitches. So that could help in a couple of ways, I guess. But also it could mean, if a guy's arm's not ready to throw, you'll have more guys blowing their arms out, right? So that's something that has to be considered, and it probably makes it something that needs to sort of be grandfathered in, and not, just arbitrarily one day. And it also has to be enforced, which is
they should just enforce it in the middle of the season like they did with the sticky stuff. That went so well this year. Nobody
Yeah.
complained about injuries.
No, oh my God, yeah, that's and it sounds like that's something that's going. But I think they're working on like in Japan they have a ball that's like pre-tacked, and here they're just they're smooth as hell and they have to rub them up, and so I think that and I don't know. It sounds like they're working towards that as a solution there, which would be good. I mean,
I love the way they do that. Let's put the rules in,
yeah,
and then we'll figure out how we'll solve the problems they caused. Yeah.
yeah. Not great. Not. I watch a lot of soccer, and it's 45 minutes with 15 minutes in between. It's perfect. It's a great amount of time to spend on a sport. I do get why a lot of people complain. A lot of people who love the game and they're like, oh, less baseball? That's terrible. You wouldn't want. I don't want less baseball. It's great, and it's like I get that, but 4 hours is a long time, man.
It is a long time.
So I don't.
Considering it's not 4 hours of baseball,
right?
An hour of advertising mixed with like 30 minutes of pitching changes and reviews and like.
Well, I'd seen one interesting idea in I guess another solution to reduce the length of a game other than a pitch clock was to put a time limit on the switches between innings, right? So at the end of the third out, instead of giving them 4 minutes to switch sides, give them like 90 seconds and just tell them to hustle in, son, You'd shave off at least a half an hour just doing that.
I think that could help, but also I think that, the TV networks would be able to sell less fewer advertisements, right?
Of course.
So
cutting advertisement isn't one of the options. Yeah.
No.
So while we're talking about this, obviously the CBA is expiring probably in a week. And in your opinion, what should, not what will, but what should the MLBPA make their number one priority in negotiations?
Ooh, that's tough. I mean, I think, I guess for me, it's just literally they need a bigger piece of the pie. Like if you look at, MLB puts out every year, they put out they boast about, the record-breaking revenues every year. I mean, the last couple have not been quite there, but like in 2019, it was, I think, $10 billion worth of revenues or something like that. And you can also, you can look back and see what they say. And it was, I think that was like their 19th straight year of record-breaking revenue. And you can also look and see where what the total payroll for the league was. And in like 2005, it was 42% of revenue. And in 2019, it was like 36.5% of revenue. It's like, I don't know if don't quote me on those numbers, but like there's definitely just been shrinkage of the percentage of revenue going into player salaries. And so that, I think, that's where they need to really fight for that. In an uncapped league, that's tough to do. I don't know how you like guarantee them doing that, and that's going to be complicated. And I think this could be a contentious lockout situation that goes on for a long time. Unfortunately, it kind of felt maybe optimistic for a little bit there at the end of the season or in October, but it seems like they're sort of they're bearing down for what's going to be a long process, as it should. I think they have to address the fact that teams are exploiting service time and are delaying free agency to the point where guys are hitting free agency when they are less likely to get a monster contract. Guys in their early part of their careers are so valuable and are so underpaid. Like Vlad made $500,000 last year or whatever it was. If he was able to market himself, on the free market, he would have made, a lot more than he's, I think I don't know if is he ARB2 this year? I think it's his first year of arbitration.
First year of arbitration.
He's going to make upwards of $10 million, and that's even suppressed, right? So getting guys paid earlier, I think is probably a really good thing, because also, a lot of them don't, the careers don't last that long. So I think that's probably something they should fight for as well. But just in general, just they need a bigger slice of the pie.
It's interesting that you do expect an intense labor negotiation, that this could go a while. And Adam brought this up. And it's such a great point about the CBA negotiations and if we lose games or not this year, because it's funny. You talk to the insiders and you listen to like Sportsnet analysts and stuff like that, and they all say they're not going to lose games. But Adam has a theory here that
it's so refreshing that you are also like pessimistic about this looming lockdown, because it does feel almost insincere the way they're just like, no, we're gonna have a lockout, but we're not gonna miss any games. Things will be fine.
Don't tune out. Don't stop consuming content.
Yeah, it just feels like if they were to also say like, yeah, we're probably gonna miss a good chunk of the season, if not the whole season. Like, the fans will come back. We all know that, but it's the time that they're away in between, right? Like, they don't want the fans to just say, okay, well, let me know when something gets figured out, and then I'll tune back in, right? Like. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It just kind of reminds me of like the housing market is such a bubble right now, right? And a lot of economists are all worried about it, and it's not sustainable and everything like that. But then you see these like mortgage brokers or real estate agents, and they say, no, this is just the new normal. Get in, because it's just gonna continue to get more expensive. And I just feel like those guys too are like, no, I just want a couple more commissions before it crashes, right?
Right, right, absolutely.
And that's kind of how I feel like when I'm reading, these MLB experts or insiders or the Sportsnet crew who are all just kind of telling us, calm down, we're gonna have a season, tune in every day because we're getting closer to it. But like, honestly, if the general consensus was, yeah, we might not have a season next year, then who really cares if Noah Syndergaard just signed a 1-year contract?
Right.
Like, who's going to click or read or watch that video when they're like, well, we're not going to have a season next year anyway. So what does it matter who my team trades for? Things are going to change 18 months from now, right?
I mean, I am pessimistic about it, and I think it could be drawn out. But I think that there's probably too much money on the table to like have like they're smart enough to not wipe out next season. I hope, but yeah. In terms of maybe losing games, that wouldn't shock me. I think that's definitely, you're absolutely right. And like Rob Manfred saying like, oh, fans understand that a lockout in the off season isn't the same as losing games, and it's like, okay, right, but. All right, you kind of had one deadline, and now you're creating another deadline, which is the start of the season, right? And you kind of and you got to this one deadline, and we're like, oh, we're not even close. And it's like, what is to make anybody think that you're going to be close by then either? Because these are like real intractable issues that have been going on for a really long time. So yeah, I think. Though I will say, I must say, like, I don't know who exactly on sports that you're referring to, but like I know that like Ben Nicholson Smith especially, Shai's great, Arden's great, but like Ben in particular has been pretty good on this, and had one of the good pessimistic things that I've seen, at the start, where it was like, talk to people because nobody on the record is saying this sort of stuff, but got people to say off the record like, oh yeah, the lockout's coming, and before most people were viewing it as such, it was like, no, the whole industry thinks it's going to be a shutdown for some time. So
it's just interesting to see all these off the record comments as opposed to the public facing.
Oh, for sure,
things are fine. The house isn't burning down. Relax.
yeah.
I don't know. I really think that with that 2020 season, we were conditioned to accept a 60-game season, and I think that is the real deadline.
It does worry me. There's proof of concept of a 60-game season,
Yeah, man. Fuck. I mean, it's bad for business for me. So I don't want to think about it. Right? Like, I could write about collective bargaining for a month or two, but. Not happily, but 6 months, a year. Jeez. Oh man.
All right, Andrew, we always appreciate your time, man, and we're so thrilled you came back on the show here. I will leave you with one last question before we let you get on with your day here. What are your thoughts on the paradigm shift that we've seen in baseball the last few years, from like stoic athletes devoid of any emotion or anything and personality to the flamboyant characters that we see today that MLB is actively promoting, right? And I mean, like, your blog is called the Batflip, right? Like, Jose Bautista just 6 years ago was enemy number one for what is now being celebrated. Where do you kind of stand on this?
Oh, I think it's great. I think it's a great shift, and it took too long, and it's insane that when Bautista flipped his bat, that was like he had to defend himself for doing that. It's like it is definitely for too long, it was, look, I don't want to get into like the racial politics of it, but it was like a lot of, it was a white dominated sport. I mean, literally until Jackie Robinson, it was literally a white sport. And for a very, very long time, Black players, Latino players came here, and there's a ton of documentation about it. You can read the Howard Bryant's book about Hank Aaron, and you can read all sorts of things about, how that was just sort of the expectation and just like the dominant force in the baseball culture. And it's still there. I mean, you can look Jeff Fry's Twitter. It will tell you all the time about how just respect the game culture is alive and well. The guy who turned a double into a single so he could hit the cycle really loves telling people to respect the game. Okay. But yeah, it's great. And I think, anybody who's watched baseball in another country, I can't say that I have, to be honest, but like a buddy of mine happened to be in Cuba at the time for in the right place at the right time, like for like the final game of the Cuban series, like the Cuban World Series, whatever they call it.
Oh, so cool.
And just talking to him about how that was just like, it's another world, and it's a whole hell of a lot more fun, like just the way people were treating it and the way the players are. And I think, fun is a good selling point, and I think MLB is right to be like, okay, but like, it sucks that it has to be like there has to be like a financial reason to compel people to do like to just respect like other people's way that they play the game, but I think that's there as well, and it's I think it's nothing but great, and I flip those bats. I mean, man, you just, I don't think you have to convince anyone, in Canada about that after the Batflip, right? Because it's like, I don't know, you just did that. You just like turned like the most pressure that has ever been in a single building in the world, and just like popped the lid off it. Man, flip. Yeah, go and admire what you just did, because that was incredible, right? Like that's, I have absolutely no problem with it. I think it's great.
100% awesome. Again, thank you so much, Andrew. Really appreciate your time, brother. All the best, and we look forward to the next time that our paths cross.
Happy to do it. Thanks, guys.